We're going to make a really interesting fun sauce that's called Tari, and we are going to use this Tare sauce to glaze eggplant and caramelize eggplant. So the base of this sauce is caramelized sugar, and it has also it has a lot of aromatics and some herbs in it. So here we've got a garlic clove, we have some pieces of ginger, a piece of a cinnamon stick, some whole coriander seeds, cloves, and some chilies. There's a lot of flexibility in the types of spices that you can use. Any of the more warming spices would be appropriate. Like you could use juniper, you could use allspice, whatever you have. You just don't want to use powdered spices. You want to use whole spices for this. Tari is a sauce that's in the Japanese repertoire of barbecue. It's really similar to, for those of you who have been to sushi restaurants and had barbecued eel, it's very much like that sauce. It's very much like teriyaki. So the first step is we add just sugar by itself. This is plain granulated white sugar into a pot. No water or anything. And we're going to caramelize it, starting it on medium-high heat. And the stage of caramelization that we're going for is sort of like a dark amber color, not unlike maple syrup. And at that point, we're going to add some hot water, and we are going to add our spices and our aromatics after we add the hot water. We can't add it when the sugar is caramelizing because then we risk burning all these spices. Something that's important to consider when making a sauce like this and caramelizing sugar in a pan by itself is you want to make sure, for safety reasons, to use a nice high-sided pan. And when we add our water, we're going to add boiling water to it. That way it will reduce the violent boiling of the occurrence between water coming into contact with really, really hot caramelizing sugar. So sugar never caramelizes uniformly. What's going to happen is around the edges of the pan, the sugar is going to caramelize, while towards the center it's going to stay raw and unmelted. So the way that we're going to compensate for that is periodically, once it does start caramelizing, we're going to take the pan off the heat and we're going to swirl the pan to get it nice and homogeneous and uniform. So you can see here that it's starting to melt towards the side there, but not anywhere else, which is normal. That's what happens. One thing that's important to keep in mind when making this sauce is you don't want to stir it at this point when it's just sugar in the pan. And the reason for that is if you introduce a spoon and you start stirring it to keep it from burning in one part and not melting in another, what will happen is when you remove that spoon and then put that spoon back in to stir again, you'll be reintroducing sugar crystals that are at a different stage of caramelization, which will cause the whole thing to crystallize. So we're going to avoid doing that. We can stir later on. I'll show you when it's a safe point to put in a spoon and stir. There's another option that's helpful, is if you have any bamboo skewers around, you can use a bamboo skewer to stir at any point, but when you do that, you want to throw the skewer away and then use another one the next time you stir. And the reason for that is, again, to not reintroduce sugar crystals at a different stage of caramelization that would cause the whole thing to crystallize. So now, if you take a look here, you can see how some of it is caramelized and some of it isn't. So what we want to do now is we want to gently swirl it together in order to get all of that quantity of sugar to caramelize at the same rate. And it's natural to see a little bit of smoke. A little bit of smoke is not a big deal. If it starts smoking a lot, then what that means is it's going to have a really bitter, burnt taste. But it's important to get all the sugar caramelized if possible, because the caramelization is what contributes a lot of flavor to this sauce. Just melted sugar wouldn't contribute any flavor. It would just make it taste really sweet. So we want a flavor contribution from the caramelized sugar. And you can see we're starting to achieve a nice sort of dark amber maple syrup or honey color. Almost all the sugar is melted at this point, which is just what we want. And so again, with a bamboo skewer, you can stir at any time. I'm just doing this for demo purposes. It's not necessary for me to actually do this right now. But just to show you, if you're worried about it, you can do this, and that you just get rid of the skewer after. And if you have to stir it again, go and get another skewer. And you never have to risk crystallizing your sugar. So that's about the color that we're looking for. All of the sugar is caramelized and melted at this point. So the next step is adding our hot water. This is boiling hot water. And you want to stand back a little bit when you do this, because what's going to happen is it's going to boil up a little bit. And you definitely don't want to allow any sugar to splatter out of that pan and get on you. It would result in really bad burns. So a nice high-sided pan and standing back at a safe distance when you add that hot water. So now that our water is in there, the caramelized sugar, it's safe to add our aromatics and our spices. And now we can put a spoon in as well. And the spoon at this point is going to help remelt the sugar, because when we do add the water, it's going to cause the caramelized sugar to set up and congeal as a layer on the bottom of the pan. You can see what I mean right here. So now we put the pan back over medium-high heat to make sure that we remelt that sugar. The proper viscosity, and at the very end adjusting it with a little bit of soy sauce. And since I do have a spoon in here at this point, I am not going to reduce this down to the point where it gets a nice thick glaze so that I don't cause crystallization of the sauce. And when that happens, you also want to be careful that we don't over-reduce it to the point where all the water evaporates out of it and it turns completely into sugar, because if that happens, the reason why we add the soy or the tamari at the very end is because there's a lot of sodium, a lot of salt in soy sauce. And so if we were the proper viscosity sauce at this stage and continue to reduce it, we would risk having this. You can see how Tari sauce be excessively. This spoon and the rate at which it's dripping off, it's a good indicator of the proper viscosity or thickness. And so at this point is when we add our soy or our tamari sauce to it. So it's slightly over reduced so that when we add our soy, it thins it out to the perfect amount. And so now this sauce is done. It just has to cool down a bit. And it's important to note that this is much thinner at this temperature because it's very hot still. When we work with the sauce itself, it's at room temperature. So this is the viscosity we're looking for at room temperature.